In Sumerian mythology, the underworld, known as Kur, was ruled by the goddess Ereshkigal. The Babylonians also had a similar concept of the underworld, which they called Irkala. According to Sumerian mythology, the underworld was a dark and gloomy place where the souls of the dead went after they passed away. The journey to the underworld was perilous, and the souls had to navigate through the 7 gates, each guarded by a different deity. The 7 deities that guard each of the 7 gates in the underworld: Neti, Gedu, Enugi, Ninkasi, Ninima, and Bilulu, and Dumutsi, who shared the time with his sister, Geshtinana. Once in the underworld, the souls were judged by Ereshkigal and her consort, Nergal. The souls were then assigned to different levels of the underworld based on their deeds in life. The worst offenders were sent to the lowest level, where they were subjugated to eternal torment. The Babylonians, in their more complex version, divided it into several layers, each again with its own ruler. The souls of the dead had to pass through each level, facing different challenges and obstacles along the way. These ideas are reflected in Greek mythology as well as Egyptian. In the Orphic text, souls of the dead pass through Hades and be judged by Persephone and Pluto. One of the most famous stories from Babylonian mythology is the tale of Ishtar's descent into the underworld. Ishtar was the goddess of love and fertility, and she decided to visit the underworld to rescue her lover, Dumutsi. However, she was unable to pass through the gates of the underworld and was forced to remove her clothing and jewelry as a payment to the gatekeepers. Luckily, she was revived and saved by the Gali of Heaven, who came down and brought her back to life. The purpose of each of the 7 gates in the underworld is to prevent the dead from escaping and to ensure that they are judged fairly before being allowed to enter to the afterlife. Each gate is guarded by a different deity, and each deity has a specific role in the judgment process. The first gate, guarded by Neti, who checks the name of the deceased against a list of those who are allowed to enter. The second gate, guarded by Gedu, who weighs the heart of the deceased against a feather to determine if they have lived a good life. This is reflected in the Egyptian myth of Sobek, who also weighs the heart against a feather, and if the heart is more heavy than the feather, the soul is consumed because they are not fit to go further into the afterlife. The third gate, guarded by the goddess Lahumu, who judges the deceased based on their deeds in life. The fourth gate is guarded by the god Shala, who determines if the deceased has been faithful to their spouse. The fifth gate is guarded by the goddess Ninlil, who judges the deceased based on their knowledge and wisdom. And the sixth gate, guarded by Nergal, who determines if the deceased has been a good ruler or leader. The seventh and final gate is guarded by the goddess Ereshkigal, who judges the deceased based on their overall worthiness to enter after the afterlife. The Babylonian 7 gates, slightly different than the Sumerian. Ereshkigal, the prominent figure in Sumerian and Babylonian mythology, is the goddess of the underworld. She is the sister of the god of the sky, Anu, and the god of earth, Enlil. She is depicted as fearsome and powerful goddess ruling over the dead and the spirits of the underworld. Ereshkigal held a senior status among the underworld deities, ruling over the category of the so-called Transtigridian snake gods. In 1903, 2 Minoan snake goddess figurines were excavated in the Minoan palace of Knossos in the Greek island of Crete. The combination of elaborate clothes that leave the breasts completely bare and snake wrangling remains a popular icon for Minoan art and religion, now also generally referred to as a snake goddess. It is quite possible that this goddess could be connected to Ereshkigal. Ereshkigal is often compared to other goddesses of death in the underworld, such as the Greek goddess Persephone and the Egyptian Isis. These goddesses are often depicted as powerful and fearsome figures, ruling over the dead and the spirits of the underworld. One of the most interesting aspects of Ereshkigal's mythology is her relationship with the god of fertility and vegetation, Dumuzi. According to some legends, Dumuzi was her lover, but he was also a symbol of life and fertility, like her. This relationship between life and death is a common theme in many mythologies and is often used to explore the cyclical nature of existence. Ningishida is a god in Sumerian mythology, known as the god of the underworld and fertility. He was often depicted as a serpent or a dragon and was associated with rebirth and regeneration. Ningishida has been compared to other serpent deities, such as the Greek god Asclepius and the Egyptian god Wadjet. Ningishida's titles connect him to plants and agriculture. The death of vegetation was associated with his annual travel to the underworld. He seems to be associated with an ancient form of the Dionysian Pluto that was worshipped by the Minoans, as the tree in his name might be vine, according to some Archaeologists, including Wilfred Lambert, and an association between him and wine is well attested. For example, one text mentions him alongside the beer goddess Ninkasi, while one of his titles, Lord of the Innkeepers, just as Dionysus and Osiris ruled the underworld after they died and resurrect. Like his father, Ninatsu, he was associated with serpents and snakes, including the mythical Mushusu, Ushamgal, and Bashmu, and in one case, Nira. He was also an underworld god, and this role was known as the chair bearer, the chamberlain of the underworld, like Osiris. Franz Wigerman, on the basis of these similarities, considers him and his father to be members of the group Transtigridian snake gods, who, according to him, shared a connection with the underworld, justice, vegetation, and snakes, the cyclical nature of death and rebirth. Ninisina is a goddess in Sumerian mythology, known as the goddess of healing and medicine. She was also associated with fertility and childbirth. She's often compared to the Greek goddess Hygeia, who is also associated with healing medicine. Both of these goddesses are often depicted holding a serpent, which is a symbol of healing in ancient times. Additionally, Ninisina was often associated with the goddess Ishtar, who was also a prominent figure in Babylonian mythology. While Ishtar is associated with love and war, Ninisina was primarily associated with healing and alchemy. Liliki, the phantom maiden, making a home in the trunk of the world tree, may represent usurpation of control of the earth. The word translates to owl or death, bird goddess figure, or perhaps she is even a doppelganger of the figure of Inanna, Inanna's dark self, because there is the description of Liliki as a joyful, laughing, smiling maiden or seductress, having functions of sexuality and death. Liliki seemingly usurping control of the earthly realm from Inanna, making her home in the Hulupu tree trunk world tree. A snake living in the roots of the tree likely represents the usurpation of the control of the underworld and immortality. This snake is said to be immune from incantations, so it is powerful against otherworldly weapons. When Inanna finds these monstrous serpents in her world tree, she cries out to Gilgamesh to help get rid of them. The mythic figures Lilitu and Lilu are demons associated with wild places and other boundaries. Like Lamashtu, they attack pregnant women and babies. This is directly referenced in the book of Isaiah 34:14. And desert creatures will meet with hyenas, and satyrs will call out to each other. There also Lilith shall repose and find for themselves a resting place. In some Jewish folklore, such as the satirical alphabet of Sirach, Lilith appears as Adam's first wife, who was created at the same time from the same clay as Adam. Lamashtu is a female demon in Mesopotamian mythology, known for her malevolent nature and association with childbirth and infant mortality. She is often depicted with a lion's head, donkey teeth, and bird feet. She is often compared to Lilith in Jewish mythology, or Medea, as well as the Greek Gorgons. Lamashtu's unique characteristics and role in Mesopotamian culture make her a distinct figure in mythology. She bore 7 names, was described as 7 witches' incantations. Her evil deeds included, but not limited to, slaying children, unborns, causing harm to mothers and expectant mothers, eating men and drinking their blood, disturbing sleep, bringing nightmares, and the use of wild plants to make potions, bringing disease, sickness, and death. In Greek mythology, Medea is often associated with the death of her own children. This is because she killed them in revenge against her husband Jason, who betrayed her. Medea's actions are seen as a symbol of the destructive power of revenge and the consequences of letting anger and hatred consume us. Medea is also the daughter of a god and is a symbol of medicine, witchcraft, and alchemy. Like Lamashtu, she is often depicted as holding serpents and even pulled by a pair of dragons in her chariot. Ancient serpents and dragons are often depicted as demons in various ancient myths and legends. In Mesopotamian mythology, the dragon Tiamat was the symbol of chaos and destruction, while in Greek mythology, the serpent Python was a symbol of evil and darkness and was used by Apollo to create the Oracle of Delphi. In Chinese mythology, the dragon was often associated with the underworld and was considered a powerful and dangerous creature. Dragons and serpents are believed to hold supernatural powers and were often associated with magic and mysticism. In Canaanite mythology, Baal is a god who is said to have conquered the Leviathan, a sea monster or dragon. This story is often seen as a symbol of Baal's power over chaos and the forces of nature. The story of Baal and the Leviathan has parallels in other ancient myths, such as the story of Marduk and Tiamat in Babylonian mythology. The ancient Leviathan is a sea monster mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, defeated by Yahweh in the book of Psalms. It is often described as a giant serpent or dragon-like creature, multiple heads, and immense strength. In Jewish mythology, the Leviathan is seen as a symbol of chaos and destruction, while in Christian tradition, it is sometimes associated with Satan or the Antichrist. The Leviathan has been referenced in other cultures, such as Mesopotamian mythology, where it is seen as a symbol of primordial chaos that existed before the creation of the world. Tiamat is the primordial goddess of the Salt Sea in Babylonian mythology. She is often depicted as a dragon or serpent, associated with chaos and creation. According to the Numa Elish, Tiamat was defeated by the god Marduk, who split her body in two to create the heavens and earth. Tiamat's story has been interpreted in many ways, with some seeing her as a symbol of the natural world, and others as a representation of the dangers of chaos and disorder. In Greek mythology, Ophion is a primordial serpent or dragon who ruled the world with his consort, Eurynome, before being overthrown by Zeus and the Olympian gods. He is sometimes associated with the creation of the world and the cosmos. The Orphic egg is a symbol of creation in Orphic text. It is said to have contained the universe and was split open by the god Phanes, or in some versions, the serpent Ophion coils around the egg to split it open, who emerges Phanes from the light as the first being, or Lightbringer. The egg is often depicted as being surrounded by a serpent, representing the cycle of life and death. Zeus and Typhon battle in the beginning of the world. Typhon was the monstrous giant who challenged the rule of the gods, and Zeus fought him in this great battle. Zeus ultimately defeats Typhon and banishes him to Tartarus, where he is chained down until the end of the world. In ancient Canaanite text, a demon king named Habayu, who is depicted as Lord of Horns in Tal, defeats El after a drinking party that El throws for the gods. El was seated in his drinking party. El drank wine until he was full, new wine until he was drunk. El went into his house, he reached his court. Thukimona and Shunama held him along. Then Habayu confronted him, Lord of Horns and Tail. He smeared him with piss and crap. El collapsed like a corpse. El went down into the underworld. The next few lines of the tablet are destroyed, but he seems to be revived by Anat and Astarte. And so you have an evil demon king who kills El, the king of the gods, and then gets away with it, and is never destroyed by El in any more texts that we know of. This shows us that the image of the goat-like demons goes back as far as human memory serves. Satyrs and goat demons are often depicted in ancient Greek and Roman mythology as creatures with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a goat, and horns. They were often associated with fertility, wine, and revelry. And in some myths, they're also known for their mischievous and lustful behavior. Angramanu is a figure in Zoroastrianism, often referred to as the destructive spirit or evil spirit. He is often compared to the devil or Satan. The word devil, which comes from the Greek diablos, which means accuser, becomes associated with goat-like appearance of satyrs, later on ultimately because of Christian mythology. The word demon comes from the Greek daemon, which originally referred to as any divine spiritual being. It later becomes associated with malevolent or mischievous demons, an opposite force of the angels. The devas and asuras are figures in mythology, in Vedic and Zoroastrian theology. In Zoroastrianism, the Deva are evil, while in Hinduism, the Devas are good. And the asuras, which are a group of powerful beings depicted as the enemies of gods in Hinduism, are actually the good gods in Zoroastrianism. This reflects the political divide between India and Persia. In Greek text, these are represented by the Olympians and Titans. The Olympians are a younger generation of gods led by Zeus, while the Titans were the older generation led by Kronos. The two groups were in conflict for control of the universe, while the Olympians ultimately emerging victorious. The word angel comes from the Greek angelos, which means messenger. In these terms, demons and angels did not have a dichotomy until the time of Christianity in the 1st century. However, the dichotomy comes straight from the asuras and devas, or Olympians and Titans. So there is a direct influence on this dichotomy. In Hinduism, Kali is the goddess associated with destruction and transformation. She is often depicted with multiple arms and a fierce expression, holding serpents, and is considered a powerful force for change and renewal. In some traditions, Kali is associated with death and the underworld. The Bhagavad Purana states that the very day that Krishna left the earth is when Kali promoted all kinds of irreligious activities into the world. All of this stems from the Sumerian dichotomy of gods and monsters. Here is a chart from Mesopotamian Protective Spirits ritual texts by F.A.M. Wigerman. As you can see, the monsters are composed, while the gods are anthropomorphic. The monsters are supernatural freaks, while the gods are representative of normal order. The monsters represents the phenomenon of nature, while the gods represent the whole to which the phenomenon belongs. Monsters intervene in human affairs. Gods, on the other hand, afford background and stability. Monsters are unpredictable associates, while gods are the masters. Monsters rebel, while gods are the rightful rulers. Monsters are the defeated enemies, gods are the victors, and so forth. According to Wigerman, the emergence of these ideas was from an attempt by the ancients to describe phenomenon happening in nature that is undescribable, that often cannot be explained unless there was some evil force at work. For example, hurricanes and floods coming from malevolent gods, rather than rain coming from good gods helping to grow crops, or a tsunami coming from the lake from a destructive force. Wigerman shows the many examples of these so-called monsters, which seem to look very similar to the Greek daemons. Here is a depiction of what would look like centaurs and satyrs and other horned deities and serpent legs. Being a monster or a daemon did not necessarily mean they were evil. For example, Pan is the Greek god of nature, wild, shepherds, and flocks. He is often depicted as half man, half goat creature, the horns and a tail. Pan is also associated with music and is said to have invented the pan flute. He is often depicted as mischievous and playful, and also has a darker side, as the god of fear and panic. Pan later becomes the image of the devil in later Christian times, most likely because the devil represents all that is opposed to Christianity. Since paganism is the ultimate opposition to Christianity, Pan becomes the symbol of the devil as a symbol of paganism. But the duality of good versus evil is much more complex than just Christian versus pagan. In the oldest Pelasgian creation myth, the serpent of chaos, Ophion, attacks Eurynome, and she bruises his head with her heel, and then banishes him to the dark underworld where he is chained down. This myth is reflected in the tempting of Eve by the serpent, or Lilith in Genesis. Genesis 3:15 says, "And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." Direct reference from the Pelasgian creation myth. Not only is this duad reflected in the Vedic myth of Mitra and Varuna, but also with the Orphic egg in the serpent of chaos, from which Phanes burst forth as the Lightbringer, and the serpent of chaos is chained to the underworld. Like Zeus defeating Typhon and chaining him in Hades until the end of the world. The myth of Prometheus, who is the creator of mankind and giver of wisdom, echoes the Sumerian Enki, as he is chained by Zeus as punishment for giving humans knowledge. This mythology is directly dealt with in the text of Revelation as well. Revelation 20:1-3. I saw an angel descending out of heaven. He carried the key to the abyss and a chain, a huge chain. He grabbed the dragon, that old snake, that very devil, Satan himself, chained him up for 1,000 years, dumped him into the abyss, slammed it shut, sealed it tight. No more trouble out of him, deceiving the nations until the 1,000 years are up. After that, he is to be let loose briefly. John then proceeds to prophesy of the victory over the serpent of chaos and the underworld titans. And Thasala gave up the dead who were in it. Thanatos and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one of them, according to what they have done. Which is in verse 13 of the same chapter of the serpent coming out of the underworld. Each of these three titans, Thasala, which is the sea, Thanatos, which is death, and Hades, who is the king of the underworld, are the titans who rule certain aspects of the underworld in Orphic theology, along with Persephone, Saturn, and Dionysus. It should not be too surprising to see this theological overlap, considering some of the earliest depictions of Jesus are as the new Orpheus, or the Good Shepherd. Christianity directly takes on this ancient struggle of these two opposing forces, and Christians today are still awaiting the apocalypse and the serpent, or Satan, to return. But all of this owes its existence to the Pelasgians and Sumerians of the ancient Copper and Bronze Age. It's clear that these ancient civilizations had a fascination with demons and monsters, and their mythology has certainly left its mark on modern religions like Christianity and Islam. Whether you believe in the existence of these creatures or not, there's no denying that they continue to capture our imaginations and inspire us to explore the mysteries of the universe. So let's raise a glass to the ancient Sumerians and their enduring legacy of myth and legend. You have just attained true gnosis.